Hi friends, welcome to the 2024 Under the Ash Tree Halloween special. I hope you're all having a safe and happy holiday, and I thank you for taking time out of your evening for me. As always, I'm going to showcase a few true and creepy stories submitted by your fellow viewers. So go ahead and get cozy and comfy, and let's get started on the Halloween fun. This took place in Sunnyvale, Washington, around 2005. I had just moved to Washington State from Georgia for a job. One of my new coworkers had an old Victorian house built in the 1900s, and he had some spare rooms that he was willing to rent to me. I met him at the house and he proceeded to show me around. He had 2 rooms available. One was in the basement and the other was in the attic. As I was touring the basement room, I didn't feel anything, no unusual sensations. I'm pretty sensitive to such things, so I usually know if something's up. We walked back downstairs through the kitchen and to the center of the house. As typical for many houses built during that time, there was a door that led to a stairway. At the top of the stairs, if you turn right, there was the rest of the attic, but to the left was a cute, charming little room. Again, I felt nothing, so I decided to take the attic room. I went back to my car and grabbed my few belongings, then proceeded upstairs to unpack. Not long after, maybe a night or two, I had a nightmare. It was, to this day, one of the worst experiences I've ever had. I don't remember the dream itself, but I can tell you when I woke up, I was filled with such dread and fear, and every negative emotion you can imagine. Something I need to add to this situation is, I'm afraid of the dark. This is an important detail because to turn on the light, you had to get out of the bed and pull the cord, which was attached to the ceiling. Feeling the way I was, this wasn't a good moment, but I did it. I got up, I turned the light on, and I sat back down and began to document the dream. As I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, I heard the light switch outside my door being turned on and off. Back then, the light switches were buttons. One button turned the light on, and the other button turned the light off. And I just kept hearing this button, push on, push off, push on, push off. I didn't really think too much about it, and just continued to document my nightmare. But then I noticed a black figure standing at the foot of my bed on my left side. And in that exact moment, I knew all of those feelings were coming from that figure. I immediately turned to look, but it was gone. The feeling was still there, that shadow person, and all of that terror, fear, and hopelessness that came with it was still there. I got up and I began talking to it. I was saying things like, I'm leaving, I'm gonna go now. I was very calm and just casually speaking. I got up and walked to the door. I opened the door, and the stairway did not have handrails. It was very narrow, very tight, but I could feel this thing was right on my back, like a backpack, and I kept speaking calmly, telling it, I was leaving, I'm gonna go. I got down to the bottom of the stairs, opened the door, and walked out of the house to the back area. I got in my car and I left. I found another place to rent that same day. I eventually came back to collect my things. When I got back to the house, the man's son was sitting at the table in the kitchen, and I asked him, why were you turning on the light in the hallway for some reason last night? He looked at me with a little smile and asked, did my dad tell you? This place is haunted. He said he had seen and heard some really strange things. So I collected my things and I never went back. My boyfriend and I had split up. I stayed at the apartment and he moved out. I never felt anything at this place, and I was there for about 5 years. However, the closet never really felt right with me. It was a walk-in type, and it was about 10 feet from my bed. When I would lay on my side, I could see the door to it. One night, I'm in bed, and I'm on my left side. And you know when someone sits on a bed with you, you can feel the mattress depress? I'm laying there, completely alone, and I felt something sit on the bed behind me. I could feel that was very malignant, evil even. Despite that evilness, it was not directed at me personally. I'm laying there feeling this, and I felt something roll in and spoon me. Imagine that. And again, here I am talking to it, and all I said was, please don't hurt me. This actually happened a few years before the Sunnyvale event. I went to sleep, and I could still feel something in the closet, but nothing was directed at me. One night in October, my ex and I were watching the first Paranormal Activity movie. We were alone in the house, and as the movie ended, I heard a loud noise in my hallway. I got up to investigate because it was odd. I mean, no one else was there. I kid you not, when I looked down the hallway, there were plates in a circle on the carpet with silverware shaped like an upside-down cross in the middle. Because of this, I chose to never watch that movie again. Back in 1998, I got a job at Waverly Hills over the summer as a security guard. For those of you who may not know, Waverly Hills is located in Louisville, Kentucky. The sanatorium was opened in 1910 as a hospital for tuberculosis patients, but closed 50 years later due to a lowering need for the facility. At the time, I wasn't aware of the history behind the building. I knew people passed away while staying at the facility, and that the practices at the time were questionable. The owner during that period wanted to tear the building down, but due to the historical significance, the state wouldn't let him, so he had to hire security to keep curious visitors out. Essentially, we were given radios and flashlights, and had to walk the halls during our shifts and escort anyone out who wasn't supposed to be there. The building had no other sort of security system since it had no power or running water. Often on my shifts, I would have to walk the bottom floor, which was the cafeteria. It was on this floor where I experienced a strange encounter. Often there would be cold spots, which was unusual since the building had no air conditioning, and it would only be in one spot. If you kept moving forward, the coldness would stop. But more notably, in the cafeteria, there was an entity who liked to mess with us. She would play with your hair and tickle your neck, and we got in the habit of calling her Emily. Emily wasn't malicious, and it seemed to be harmless. It never failed, though. When someone was on the floor, Emily would make her presence known. Another instance was a particular hallway where a ball always sat. It was said this ball belonged to a boy, and he liked to play with anyone willing to give him the time. Multiple times, I saw this ball come rolling down the hall when I was the only person on the floor. I would even stop to send the ball back up the hallway, just for it to be returned. After leaving that job, I watched a documentary where I learned much more about my ghostly encounters. It turned out Emily was a woman named Mary Rose, but I never learned the true identity of the boy with the ball. Gradually, as the years went on, I became curious to learn more about the place. I'd seen documentaries, but I wanted to experience the history of Waverly once again. So myself, along with some friends, decided to take a tour. During the tour, I again felt the presence of Emily. While we were on the cafeteria floor, I felt the breeze tickling the back of my neck. I had a feeling it was her. I decided to call out, "Knock it off, Emily." It was around this time my friend who was behind me snapped a picture. Here, you can see several orbs around us. During my time working there, I never really heard anything, and quite frankly, it wasn't a feeling of heaviness within the building. The way I saw it, I was employed as the security guard for them, since this is their home and they deserve peace. Growing up, my friends and I often walked to the bay where we would spend the day coming up with different make-believe games. On this particular day, it was myself and two of my close friends at the time. We planned to have a pretend wedding on the sand by the water. This place was one we visited often because we liked to go there and explore, or just create games to pass the time, and plus it was relatively close to my house. Well, during our fake wedding, two of us were the soon-to-be newlyweds, while the third was our officiant. To set the scene, the officiant was to the left of us. I, being one of the newlyweds, faced the water, while our third friend was facing me. Behind me was a tree line. During our pretend ceremony, my eyes focused behind my friend in front of me, where I noticed a figure out in the water. It caught me off guard because we had already been there for quite some time, and no one was around or near us. We were the only people out there at the time. I continued to zone out, staring at this figure, trying to make out what was going on. As I continued to stare, I noticed it was a woman who was waist deep in the bay. She didn't seem to be real. I wasn't even paying attention to our game anymore. The longer I stared, I noted not only was this woman wearing a dress, which would be weird attire to swim in, but she had no face. The realization and panic started to set in because I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. My friends started to notice my widening glance and bated breath. They called my name several times before I brought my attention back to them. They asked me what the matter was. I slowly explained there was a woman in the water. Both of my friends turned their heads to look, but she was gone. I noticed I must have sounded crazy, but I know what I saw. After my strange encounter, I suggested we leave. I wasn't going to take any chances. I guess I've had a few moments where I've encountered ghosts. This story in particular happened when I was a teenager in the early 2010s. My dad used to live in an old trailer park called Island View, and back in the 70s it was a drive-in theater. I wasn't aware of the history of the property at the time. I used to spend every weekend at my dad's house and often would have to babysit my younger brothers with my stepsister. On this night, it wasn't much different than it usually was over there. My stepsister had her boyfriend over at the time, and we were all just kind of hanging out in the living room after my brothers went to sleep. From where I was sitting in the living room, you could see the kitchen, which had this tall pantry thing in the walkway between the kitchen and the living room. I was sort of zoning out when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. At first, I thought my brain was playing tricks on me since my stepsister and her boyfriend were on the opposite end of the living room from me, and my brothers were in the bedroom behind me. I turned my head in the general direction of the movement when I made eye contact with a man. He was tall, had an afro-style haircut, and wore clothes that very much screamed the 70s. We're talking the bell-bottom pants and a long-sleeve shirt with a vest over it. He was leaning up against this pantry, and when he noticed my gaze, he leaned forward, looked directly at me, then leaned back and disappeared. I immediately became uneasy and started panicking. I jumped off of the recliner I was in and ran to my stepsister and her boyfriend. I kept telling them that someone was in the house. Her boyfriend went to check out the kitchen, and of course, he found no evidence of anyone. That night, I told my dad about the events of the evening, and he just replied, "Oh yeah, the whole property's haunted." He went on to explain that where his trailer sat was where the concession stand once was. He theorized that maybe my ghostly visitor was just hanging out, still waiting on his popcorn. We continued to have experiences in that trailer until he eventually moved out. One thing that was always sort of eerie was this touch lamp my stepmom had. This lamp was old and had no power cord. Like, it was ripped from the socket. I've never known it to work, but sometimes when you'd be sitting in the living room by yourself at night, that lamp that had no electricity would just turn on and off all night long. When I was a boy, I'd often go hunting with my uncles and grandpa. The particular hunting spot was located in a big field where each part of the field was sectioned off by several gates. To enter the different sections, someone had to jump off the truck, unlock the gate, let the truck through, then hop back on. We were used to this since it was one of our family spots, but this night, something unusual happened. We went through the gates like we always did, and after we were done hunting, we started our way back through the field, stopping to relock the gates, then hop back on. As we were making our way through the last handful of gates, we noticed an animal quickly catching up with our truck. This was odd since we weren't flying through the field, but we were going faster than what your typical dog would be able to keep up with. As the animal got closer, it lined up to the side of the truck. We all looked over in complete shock. This animal resembled a dog, but it had glowing red eyes and was unlike anything we'd seen before. My uncle made the comment the dog might be sick, maybe it had rabies or something, so he decided to fire a few shots at it, feeling it would be a mercy killing. My uncle fired several times at the dog. He hit it multiple times, but every time a bullet struck it, the dog just shook it off and continued to run. We started to panic at this point. We didn't know what this thing was and if it was out to harm us. As we approached the last of the gates, someone had to get down to let us through. My uncle who shot at the thing volunteered. We were all worried for him, but he armed himself with his gun, and he was ready to hop off the truck to let us all through. But then the strangest thing happened. As our truck slowed, so did the dog. We stopped the truck, and the dog stopped. It sat several feet away and just waited for us to unlock the gates. And then, just as soon as we started rolling again, the dog started running. He did this for 2 more gates. By the time we made it through the last gate, the dog stopped at the edge of the field. As we continued to drive away from the field, we looked in the rearview mirror, and the dog was just gone. He never followed us through the last gate. We don't really know what it was or if it even intended to hurt us, but we never saw the dog again. This happened many decades ago. I live in a rural area of sorts, and I was told this story by my family. So my great-uncle purchased a new truck, and where I live, half of my family lived on this long dirt road that has a curve sort of in the middle. The road isn't very wide. It's enough for 1 car to drive down at a time. When you drive along the curve, there are woods on one side and a pond on the other. My great-uncle drove his new truck along the road to go show his parents his new purchase. As he was making the turn on the curve in the road, a giant hairy thing walked from the pond side into the middle of the road. My uncle hit the brakes, but it being a dirt road, he still ran into the thing. Upon initial glance, he thought it was a bear and didn't dare to try to get out and check, because if it was a bear, it likely wasn't dead. In fact, it was probably just mad. So instead, he attempted to reverse and see if he could kind of swerve around the thing by the woods side of the road, since there was a little more shoulder to use. As he went to reverse, he noticed his truck wasn't moving. It was like his tires spun, but had no traction. As he looked in the rearview mirror, he saw a hairy creature. The thing appeared to be holding on to the back of his truck. He didn't know what to do. Instead of reverse, he decided to just power forward. As he pushed the gas, the thing let go of his truck. The creature appeared to run off into the woods side of the road as my uncle drove away from the scene. He couldn't believe what just happened. When he made it home, he relayed this story to his dad, my great-grandpa. My great-grandpa told him he probably ran into a bear and it wasn't anything to be worried about. But my great-uncle was convinced it was a Sasquatch. As they went out to see his new purchase, they realized tufts of hair were in the grill of the truck. Of course, my great-grandpa said, "See, it's just a bear." But as they walked to the rear, there were deep claw marks in the bumper of his truck. Hi, friends! Wow, what a lineup of great stories. I thank you all for taking the time to send these to me and allowing me to share them with the community. I hope you all enjoyed this special edition of Under the Ash Tree, and I look forward to doing this again next year. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you all so much. I hope you have the best week ahead of you because you deserve it. But for now, we must part ways. So, happy Halloween to all you goblins and ghouls. And as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye, friends.